Hi viewers. Welcome back to another week of It's 420 Somewhere. A lot has changed since last time. I got this watch thing. Actually, I think I had it last time, so never mind. Anyway, so today we have some stories about the next steps after legalization. So this is going to be a themed day based upon weed is now legal in your state or weed is now legal in the nation. Now what? And the answer to that is extremely murky. Well, there really isn't an answer to that, unfortunately, spoiler. But we're going to kind of tackle it and see where states have gotten complications and where things have gone wrong a little bit. The first state that today an article came out about in the Boston Globe was obviously Massachusetts, where weed is now legal, and there are all of these pot shops opening up around populated areas in the neighborhood, like around Wrigley Field. And the next question is, when people travel to the city and they buy weed in these stores, where do they smoke it? And at this point, there's no answer to that. There's no solution. So people just go in alleyways and they end up getting fined $100 for smoking. And so this has become this inevitable part of it, where you smell weed and it's automatically considered illegal still, even though it's legal to buy in the state. So a state senator, Julian Sir, has introduced a new bill that's hoping to solve some of this by creating basically marijuana lounges in the state of Massachusetts, where you could go and legally be fine and smoke your pot that you just bought at a newly legal store. There are versions of this that are popping up around the country. There are some in Nevada, California, Colorado, obviously, and it just makes sense as a next step for that to be a thing that would be introduced in almost every state that has legal pot. However, it's not something you necessarily think of when you legalize pot. It's one of those nuances that kind of gets brushed under the rug because there's such a mad dash to get to the point of legalization. Another state that's facing complications is New Jersey, which has been facing complications since the public voted to legalize pot in November. Finally, about 2 weeks ago, they passed the bill, making it legal. However, now there is a question of discrimination in the workplace. Because of this bill, it is technically illegal to fire somebody for smoking pot on their off time. But there's a blurred line between off time and work. And even beyond that is when this will even start being functional. Because even now it's complicated whether you're operating on the old version or the new version, and it could potentially take months, according to Asbury Park Press. This is something that's going to be ironed out over time, of course, because they're going to get used to the idea of legal pot, and these things will start to simplify. However, now we're in that in-between stage where there are just all of these things that you don't think about that are getting in the way. Kind of our second topic in terms of what to do after legalization is the idea of regulation. And there was an article posted this morning in the New York Times that talks about medical marijuana not having as much regulation as it should, as other medicine does. One of the main points is that the author says people confuse the idea of medical marijuana with recreational marijuana. And quoted in the article is a Canadian study that says of 709 medical users, 80.6% also reported using marijuana recreationally. So understandably, for something like medical marijuana, it's hard to kind of decide what is medicine and what is recreation, especially if you're doing both. Another thing cited in the article is that 17% of edibles are accurately labeled, only 17%. There's such a small amount of regulation, including THC capping, which is becoming more and more prominent in the discourse around marijuana. And medical marijuana seems to have even more of an issue with this. Speaking of THC capping, there is more and more a consensus, at least within the lawmakers in places like Florida, where the idea of capping the THC levels of marijuana is something that they should be doing. There are people who are against this, the people at NORML without the A. They strongly believe that THC cap should not be a thing because they say it will put people back in the illicit market for getting that dosage that they're used to. So you have people on one side of the debate saying that there should not be any more regulation, that it's going to cause people to go back into finding illegal ways to get what they need. And then there are other people saying that because there's no regulation, things are getting out of hand. And it seems there's an option that would satisfy both parties, and that is just basically more education, more awareness on what these things do and how to combat recklessness and all of these things that could get in the way and potentially cause psychosis and all of these bad traits that people use to fearmonger. This brings me to the last point of the day, which is from a chemist called an amateur chemist called Hamilton Morris, who has a show on Viceland called Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia, where he goes into a bunch of different drugs and shows their history and all of these things. It's a great show. He's also a very interesting mind, and his belief is that nothing should be regulated and there should just be more awareness out there. He was recently on the Joe Rogan Experience, and he made a very good analogy for how we see drugs, and I think I'm going to play that at the end of this, and that will be the end of this episode. So enjoy this clip.
An analogy that I've been thinking about for years, like this is kind of like a long analogy, so it's gonna be like a 1 minute analogy, but like it would be like if in the 60s people started listening to music for the first time, and they decided that it was associated with the counterculture, anti-war movement. Some people were listening to music too loud and causing irreversible damage to their hearing. And so medical doctors said, okay, this is clearly a problem. This person is deaf as a result of listening to music. We've got to regulate it. We've got to prohibit it to protect people because it's a problem. And then on top of that, there's an added advantage that because everyone is going to continue listening to music, we can selectively prosecute the people that we want to because it's a little crime that everyone is committing. And then that keeps going for years, and people continue listening to music and playing music, and they create their own biases where they say it's okay to listen to music. It's just as long as you don't perform it or record it. It's all right as long as you're just a listener. And then eventually some scientists get together and they all say that they've never listened to music before because if they had, it would somehow bias their understanding and that would be terrible. So they've never listened to music before, but they've looked at old pre-prohibition information on music and they've decided scientifically that it is in fact very good and can be used as a medicine. And then everyone embraces it as a medicine and says, oh, I just listened to music today. It was so wonderful for my anxiety. It was really fantastic. And that would be great and that would be good and that would be a way to make music legal again. But it also would entirely miss the point that music doesn't have to be a medicine. And to be clear, you could do these studies with music. Music is a medicine. There is music therapy. I'm sure you could design a study where music treats neurodegenerative diseases or music treats depression. I guarantee it. And you could get positive results. And you could then say that music is a medicine. But so what? It doesn't need to be a medicine.
Right.
And I just want people to, as much as I enjoy this new medicalization and the decriminalization that's taking place, I just hope people remember that it doesn't need to be any of those things. And this history of justification is ultimately something that we are doing because we're afraid that to acknowledge the fact that we should be free to do whatever we want, regardless of whether or not it's good.